Welcome to this Mad for War battle report. By 1649, King Charles I was dead. The small royalist navy under the command of Prince Rupert was being hunted relentlessly across the western seas. The prince had moved his ships from Holland to Kinsale in southern Ireland, briefly to the Scilly Isles, and then by March 1650 found his fleet anchored off the city of Lisbon in Portugal. A large Commonwealth squadron under the command of Robert Blake blockaded the city. Of course, this annoyed the Portuguese greatly. After much diplomatic wrangling and some skirmishing, the prince decided to make a run out into the open ocean. This happened between the 21st and the 22nd of July 1650. The prince's squadron was accompanied by both Portuguese and French ships allied to him. There was action between the two fleets. This game extends that action into a full-scale battle. The scenario is large, 12 ships on one side, 15 ships on the other. The scenario is called Rupert's Run. One of the things I really enjoy is all the pre-game preparation. These fleets have the same points value, although their composition is quite different. The Prince's Royalist fleet is divided into 3 divisions. One under himself, a second under his brother Prince Maurice, and the third under a Portuguese admiral. Robert Blake's Commonwealth fleet is also divided into 3 divisions. One under himself, a second under Admiral Badley, and the third one under Admiral Moulton. I'm using the event card options in this game. The deck's divided into 2 parts. The bulk of the card deck is used during the game and cards are drawn each turn. There's a separate group of cards which are played before the game begins. Depending on the number of ships under command for each player, a certain number of cards is allocated to each side. These cards enhance or inhibit the performance of individual ships. Both sides received some useful cards and those have been allocated to various ships. I'm also using the limited ammunition rule for this battle. Clearly the Prince's long time at sea and Blake's squadron's constant watch has worn down the amount of ammunition available to both fleets. Several ships are pretty low on ammo. The Royalists drew 4 cards and the Commonwealth fleet drew 3. All of the cards were allocated across 4 ships. As it turned out, each of these 4 ships would be at the centre of the hottest action in the battle. Here's Prince Rupert's Royalist fleet of 15 ships, including 4 Portuguese, 2 French and 3 fire ships. And here's Admiral Blake's Commonwealth fleet of 12 ships, including 1 fire ship. Prince Rupert's fleet must break the blockade and reach the Atlantic. Blake must destroy the Royalist fleet. The wind is south-southeast and there's no turn limit on the game. In a large action like this, there can be several turns of manoeuvring before the shooting actually starts. That can be really interesting, but to keep it even more interesting, some event cards move things along. These give each commander something to worry about and something to do. I chose to move the fleets by divisions. This makes things pretty quick, but it also creates some challenges. One of the first events was a grounding. The Royalist fire ship Mary ran aground on an uncharted hazard. Mary remained stranded on the hazard for quite some time and rejoined the battle much later. Blake had a headache when the crew of the Constant Warwick mutinied and the ship withdrew from the battle. This happened in turn 3, way before the action started. Jostling to break free of the Tagus estuary, the English fire ship Black Knight collided with the French frigate Lee. Both were badly damaged. It seemed almost inevitable that Prince Maurice's ship Convertine would ram the fire ship Elizabeth. Convertine passed the skill check and both ships sailed on, having narrowly avoided each other. This series of shots shows the evolving tactical situation in the battle. Prince Rupert's fleet has the weather gauge. As it attempts to break free of the Tagus estuary, Blake moves his fleet south. The Commonwealth ships are to leeward of Rupert's squadron. The lead division of Blake's fleet is under Admiral Moulton. Watch as it races ahead of the rest of the fleet. It moves as far south as possible before turning into the wind. Then it attempts to beat up and gain the weather gauge over Prince Rupert. The politically reluctant Portuguese ships stay as close to the shore as possible. Half of their vessels are rated as raw, not for inferior seamanship, rather a reluctance to join battle with the Commonwealth fleet. Rupert's own division, which is on the right of the Royalist fleet, attempts to come around behind Blake. The shooting war started in turn 5, about 20 minutes into the game. One of the fastest Royalist ships, Scott of 30 guns, pierced Blake's line and opened fire. At about the same time, Rupert's lead fireship Elizabeth ignited successfully and pointed herself at the enemy. This was an anticipative move as she hoped to hit Resolution, the largest ship in the enemy fleet. Here's the moment that Scott broke through the line. She has a perfect bow shot on Resolution. She's less than 50 yards distant and it should be devastating fire. Unfortunately for Scott, her gunnery was very disappointing. From this moment, her fate was sealed. The battle exploded into life on turn 6. Prince Rupert's flagship, Constant Reformation, attracted heavy attention from the Commonwealth fleet. This caused chaos on the main gun deck. Luckily, the heavy damage was offset by a card which allowed some repairs to be made to Constant Reformation. Assurance wasn't so lucky. Her rudder was shot away and she started to circle to starboard. The French ships bore menacingly down on Resolution. Both had the perfect raking shot against her stern. The old battleship survived the bombardment. Caught between the hammer and the anvil, Scott did not. In haste to engage Morris's convertine, Phoenix found herself bow-raked by Assunção. The English ship's powder store caught fire, burning all of her remaining powder. She was then unable to fire for the rest of the battle. The Portuguese flagship Rainha Santa Isabella bow-raked the Tiger, causing terrible casualties amongst her crew. Coda to the action of turn 6 was the very uneven exchange between the tiny Blackmoor Lady and the mighty Leopard. Turn 7 was dominated by an absolutely extraordinary event. The Royalist fireship Black Knight had embarked on a run into the enemy line. As Blake's ships broke through the smoke, Andrew found herself on a collision course with the fireship. 4 of Blake's ships were very close to the exploding fireship. Andrew, which had caused the explosion, Assurance, which was circling just off the fireship's stern, Providence, which was sweeping by, and Blake's own flagship St. George, which was right alongside the fireship. Many vessels were damaged, including Rupert's own flagship Constant Reformation and the French ships very close by. Temeraire was very badly affected. Elsewhere, the general engagement continued, but 2 boarding actions had been initiated. Prince Maurice's convertine had failed to board Phoenix, but the prize merchantman Second Charles was successful. Unbeknownst to anyone else, Tiger's unpaid crew had set themselves a mission of capturing a prize today. The already damaged English ship wove gingerly through the enemy line and singled out Nossa Senhora, a Portuguese man of war. She hove alongside, delivered a broadside, grappled and boarded. At the southerly end of the battle, the powerful Leopard opened fire on a Portuguese ship. This ship was Nossa Senhora, which at that point was being boarded by Tiger on a larboard side. Because of the smoke, Leopard's captain did not see Tiger. Much of the devastating broadside hit Tiger and her men as they attempted to board the Portuguese. A very unfortunate blue-on-blue incident. Despite a heroic effort, the crew of Tiger were unable to overcome Nossa Senhora. They had the best of the initial combat, but their experience of the previous 30 minutes had just been too much for them, and they struck the colours. Turn 8 continued to provide incident and drama. Rupert's 4 capital units were through the enemy line and heading out to sea. Blake attempted to reorder his own division, but in the manoeuvres, the crippled Assurance collided with Andrew. The intense action continued towards the south. Moulton's Leopard came to the aid of the hard-pressed Phoenix by boarding 2nd Charles. Badley's entrance boarded Nossa Senhora, which was still reorganising after taking Tiger. The remaining Portuguese ships swung north, whilst Rupert was heading south. The badly damaged Blackmoor Lady was unable to avoid being hit by her own fire ship Elizabeth. She attempted to sink the burner before it could do any real damage. The most spectacular event occurred when the Commonwealth fire ship Signet attempted to ignite. She was amidst a dense cloud of ships and exploded. The explosion of Signet was far more dramatic than that of Black Knight. Signet went up in a huge fireball. Phoenix remained barely afloat. 2nd Charles was abandoned by her raw crew. Convertine, which had 2 ships directly between her and the blast, was heavily damaged. And the entire scene was one of complete chaos in which some ships were still fighting each other at close quarters. Admiral Badley was notable for his heroism, inspiring his men to put out fires and continue to fight, despite the terrifying conditions. Beating into the wind, the old warhorse Resolution let rip an enormous broadside into Convertine. The crew of Mayflower had managed to get a fire under control, bring their ship around, and pour a tremendous raking broadside into the departing Temeraire, which hit her right across the stern galleries. The French ship had had absolutely enough of the fight and headed off out to sea. She was barely afloat. Amidst the smoke and flames, Admiral Badley led a charge which took Nossa Senhora and recaptured Tiger. Admiral Moulton's men took possession of the abandoned 2nd Charles. He also saved the crippled Phoenix. The battle was over. Prince Rupert made it to the open ocean with 4 ships. His heavily damaged flagship, Constant Reformation, the French frigate Lee, the French frigate Temeraire, which was barely afloat, and the undamaged Swallow, which was the flagship of Sir John Menes. Their escape was covered by the 3 Portuguese ships of Alvarez. He signalled to the Prince as their ships passed. He would hold up any pursuit by the Commonwealth fleet. Rupert lost several ships. Scott had been sunk by gunfire. 2nd Charles had been taken. 2 fire ships had been expended, and the 3rd had been abandoned because she was damaged. Blackmoor Lady had caught fire accidentally and was drifting. With Convertine damaged and surrounded, Prince Maurice had no option than to surrender. His captivity, however, was short-lived because the Portuguese were able to negotiate his release. This was done by promising Blake the chance to refit his ships in Lisbon under guard. The Portuguese had come out of the action with some honour. They had fulfilled their commitments to Prince Rupert and fought well. They lost 1 ship, the Nossa Senhora, taken by entrance, but she was given back to them by a grateful Blake, happy to be able to refit in Lisbon. Greatly wounded, Prince Rupert's fleet had slipped a net, but Blake was in no position to follow up. Not a single ship in his command was undamaged, and some were barely afloat. It would take weeks before some of these ships could make it back to England. So who won? Prince Rupert's privateers, in a greatly diminished state, had made it to freedom. Blake had remarkably lost no ships in combat. The reckoning on Constant Warwick would have to be done later. The fire ship Signet had exploded. The remaining 10 ships under his command had all suffered varying degrees of damage. He'd taken 3 prizes, albeit one had been returned almost immediately, and his reputation as a naval commander had been enhanced. The capture of Prince Rupert and the destruction of his remaining ships would have to wait for another day.